studied China's history this semester. What's your biggest takeaway?
My biggest takeaway from learning Chinese history this semester was that the differences between the Chinese and the West and why they really can't collaborate with each other without having some kind of animosity between them. So, as Mr. Burrell said, if you go to China, you can see Western people strutting down the streets. They think they're number one. They think they're on top. They think they're always right, and the Chinese is wrong. So they're really condescending. But what they really don't know is what the Chinese people know and how the Chinese people think about the Westerners. So the Chinese obviously know their own history. Like they know it from their perspective, while the Westerners don't really know what they did in China. And that's the biggest reason why there's so much clashes between them. Because Western history obviously doesn't really teach stuff that makes them look bad, because that would be counterproductive. So the Westerners don't know what they really did in China, like all the bad stuff they did, all the killing they did, all the bad influences, and all that other bad stuff that the Chinese hate the Westerners for. But the Chinese know that, and they keep that in mind all the time. So when they see the Westerners, they view them as really cocky and really full of themselves, while the Westerners don't know that, as I said. So why did this happen? What resulted in this happening? Well, during the Ching Dynasty, when McCartney and other and all those other like missionaries and traders came to China, came knocking at their door, like China, like what the Westerners wanted to do was spread their religion, wealth, and power. Like that were their three motivations. Well, so when they first came knocking at their door, the Chinese, they weren't used to being bossed around because they always viewed themselves as the Middle Kingdom. They thought they were number one. And they were isolated for centuries and centuries, so they had no contact with outside civilizations except for like Vietnam, Japan, and Korea. So these are rather small states, so of course China was the one dominating them. So they weren't used to being bossed around by the British, while the British, they were used to being the boss too, as China was. And so what they would do is, what Britain did was like they came into China and they started demanding things. And China, of course, was like, what are you to tell us what to do? We're number one. You're someone just like a barbarian that came out of nowhere, and you're trying to instill us with your crappy religion. And also, like the British, to make that worse, like British didn't show any interest in Chinese culture. They had no value and didn't even try to really understand the Chinese. So, as we learned the history of China this year, the Chinese really valued their rituals and like their culture. So when these ignorant Westerners came knocking at their door, the Chinese obviously looked down on them, sneered at them, because the Westerners, they were like little kids, spoiled brats that came into China demanding stuff, and like the Chinese were the grown ups who actually understand things, and like they wanted, like the Chinese weren't belligerent to the Westerners. They actually tried to understand and tried to trade, and they were actually really respectful of Western culture and stuff like that. But the Westerners didn't do the same for China. So that's why that's the disagreement that built on top of that. And as the things kept like piling on top of each other, like things kept getting worse because the Westerners didn't show any respect, as I said, and like Kangxi like expelled all the all the Westerners and the missionaries out of China, saying they're no good. So like the British, they had to do something to get back into China, because like China's so big, you can earn there's so much like opportunities, but all they had was like wool and those kind of products that China already had, even like better versions of it, because like in China's hot, so it wouldn't make sense to wear wool clothes. They would rather wear silk clothes, which is more comfortable and like more better for the weather there. So the Chinese obviously didn't really have interest in what the Westerners had to offer. But so the British had to turn to something else, and they turned to opium. So what they did was they like started bribing, smuggling, and all that things to get opium into China, and they did, and as a result, they drugged 10% of their population. That's 140 million today in today's terms. Like there's 1.4 million, 4 billion people in China, so that's really big number. And obviously, to save face, a good leader needed to stop this. So the Ching Dynasty declared war on the West and on Britain to be specific. And things didn't really turn out well because Britain had better ships, better weaponry, bigger guns, and stuff like that that the Chinese really didn't have because they focused their attention on other fields such as like astronomy and stuff like that. So the Chinese got crushed. So what resulted was unequal treaties, Treaty of Nanking, and the Chinese were utterly humiliated. So what resulted was that the Chinese had to give up 5 treaty ports, give up Hong Kong, give extraterritoriality to the British, and let the British spread their religion. So the things that resulted from this was atrocious because like the Western influences in China that like it spurred so many more things like Taiping Rebellion. It led to 20 million people dying. That's more than World War One. So the Chinese people obviously know all this from their history. So they know what all the Westerners did and all the evil that they brought with them. So they really resent the Westerners till today for what they have done. So if the Westerners like continue being like this and being ignorant of Chinese culture and stuff like that, they're things are just not gonna they aren't gonna work out because the Chinese they're pretty sentimental. So and they know what happened, so they're always gonna keep that in heart. They're always gonna view the Westerners with some like kind of suspicion. They're always not go- they're gonna have that distrust and hate for the Westerners, and the Westerners don't know that. So in this case, ignorance really isn't bliss because it's really hurting them. So I found this really important because later I want to become a banker or like some kind of businessman, and China's becoming the world #1 economy. So when I get a job and stuff like that, China's gonna be hard to ignore. So what the importance is that I need to know about what the Chinese think about the Westerners and like their point of view to understand the Chinese. Because if I act like the Westerners, I won't be able to do business with them. Because like as I said, they don't like the Westerners. So I found it really important that I understand all this and why the Chinese have that animosity that still exists today against the Westerners.